came with the gross total acreage density calculation. The buildable area, another thing about the easement is all of the buildable area is notated to be outside of that easement. And so the easement prohibits residential development, putting buildings on that property, but does not prohibit open space or storage. And so we feel that that's consistent with how the lots are oriented and the buildable area for that.
No, Paul, turn your phone off, please.
Yeah. Okay. The next item that's of note is our county line. So this project currently spans the county line between Davis County and Weber County. All phase 2 lies within that county border. Portions of each lot are within that county line. So we don't see a need to hold off on a preliminary approval, knowing that pending a final approval, they would have to get that boundary line adjusted before we'd approve a final plat. So what would most likely go forward is a preliminary approval based on that county line adjustment. Then we would approve each phase. So phase 1 would be approved as a final if everything is compliant with our code. And then once a boundary line is secured and all of the annexations have taken place, then they can apply for the second phase approval for the final subdivision plat. Are there any questions on that?
Sorry, I might not have heard you correctly. Are you saying tonight we would also approve the final?
No,
Okay.
no. I'm sorry if that was confusing. Tonight is just a preliminary approval. Because it's a preliminary approval and not a final approval, we can give a preliminary approval without the annexation being complete, but we would not give a final approval until that annexation is complete. And so similar to other subdivisions, we would do phased final subdivision approvals where we'd approve the first phase, and then once everything is complete for the second phase, then they can apply for a final approval for the second phase. There is another concern with water rights. Currently, the developer does not have enough shares with South Weber Irrigation to supply the entire site. They would need to finalize that before any final approval would be made. It's not unusual to have a preliminary approval with the note that needs to be taken care of before any final approval or if any final application could be submitted. But
Sorry, point of order. Just can you clarify? Are you saying culinary shares or secondary?
Secondary shares.
Culinary is fine.
Culinary was fine. Yes. Yeah, it is the secondary shares.
Thank you.
The developer feels that they have a solution to that, but that until that's finalized and everything is approved through the secondary water companies, we wouldn't be able to proceed with a final application until that point. But they wish to pursue a preliminary application without that resolved. Staff doesn't see, because it is a preliminary approval, obviously there's another check before they can have a final approval, and so it doesn't prohibit the preliminary approval, but it would prohibit their final approval. It's similar to the county line adjustment. Are there any questions about those 3 items? Okay. In regards to the first item, the easement and usable acreage, we did receive public comment from Todd Curl Jensen, Assistant Attorney General from the State Attorney General's office about this item. I'm just going to read that so I don't misrepresent his comments here, just so we're all aware that comment was received. To the Chair and Commissioners of the South Weber City Planning Commission, I represent the Governor's Office of Economic Development, Go Utah, pursuant to the Utah Code 63M-6-201. I write regarding an agenda item 4C on the 10/20/2021 agenda for the Planning Commission. More than a decade ago, the state acted to condemn certain parcels of property around Hill Air Force Base, located in and around the accident potential zone, to create restrictions on development, easements, etc. There is a review process in place with our office and Hill Air Force Base to review proposed developments in that area around Hill Air Force Base to verify that the subject properties are not affected by a prior state condemnation action, judgments, or other restrictions on development in that area, easements, or other land use restrictions. A title search should have identified those recorded restrictions, but sometimes title reports miss things. That's why there is a title insurance industry. Of course, hopefully the parcels in this particular Riverwood project / subdivision are not burdened or negatively affected by the state's property interests and restrictions, but it is best to double check first before developers or other entities incur or spend thousands of dollars on development that is prohibited by law. I have also reached out to the agent of the developer involved in this project, Nielsen Land Development LLC, and asked them to submit the parcel numbers involved with this project to my office so we can conduct a review together with Hill Air Force Base. I suggest that any approval of this development project by the South Weber City Planning Commission may still be subject to some type of land use restriction created by the state's prior condemnation action or easements. It is too soon at this point in time to make a determination on that issue, but preliminary review of the location of the parcels and the names of prior owners compared with records in our office suggests that the subject parcels may be affected. We would like to review this more in depth with additional information provided by the developer. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Carl Jensen, Assistant Attorney General, State Agency Counsel Division, Utah Attorney General's Office. I did speak with Todd on the phone prior to this meeting, discussing what this project entails. He recommended to me that this can still go forward in a preliminary approval as well, pending the state's findings on that. After discussing with him, the subdivision does have the easement notated on their plat. That was notated as well in all staff notes to the developer and to the planning commission tonight. We're aware of that. In asking if this is a common practice to contact the state attorney general's office to verify this, he said it's typically not, but they would always recommend it. None of us were aware that that was something that needed to be done, and he said that it was not a necessary action. They just, now that they are aware of the item, they need to proceed and just double check on their side. He said, most likely we've done our due diligence because it's gone through our engineering and through the planning process, but they just need to review on their side to make sure that's compliant. Is there any questions on that issue? If you want to jump to the next slide. Is there a question? I heard that.
Let's just finish with the introduction, then we'll open the public hearing, then we'll hear, I suppose you're from Nelson, we'll give you some time and then we'll have our discussion. So if you could, okay.
So here's the one of the maps, that's the word, that was submitted for the preliminary approval. You can see the hashed marks at the far right are the noise zone easement for Hill Air Force Base, notated on the plat. You'll notice the lots that are to it would be the north of that, all would have the buildable area outside of that noise easement zone. Those areas would just be utilized for acreage on a back property. That's where
Anything else?
I don't have anything else.
Okay, well, let's move on to the public hearing. I'll look for a motion to open the public hearing on item number 4.
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing and action on the preliminary plat and improvement plans for Riverwood subdivision, 56 lots, RLM, by the applicant Nielsen Homes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, the public hearing is open. So if you have questions or comments on item number 4, now's the time. You're welcome to come to the podium. Again, state your name, address, and go from there. I'm glad someone's coming up. It's a lot of effort to make a motion and second and not have somebody get up, so thank you.
Kenny Long, 217 East Huron Drive, South Beaver, Utah. You addressed the culinary and secondary water, but I didn't hear anybody address sewer connections. Are we still within what we can allow, what is allowed for South Weaver? And did Central the Sewer been contacted on this? Have they notified you saying that yes, you still have plenty? And has there any exemptions been made for this development to go through? Another question. And another one is, this is a document out of the county's code, and it's 7.3, it says local government role. And the local governments surrounding the base are supposed to notify the state and the federal government about these easements. That's been presented in the past as well. So that's the end of my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
My brain thinks my body can do things it really can't anymore. Bill Bills, 7749 South, 2100 East. Thank you again for all of your time and effort on all of this. When looking at this, the only question that I had, and it leads also to the next phases, is the noise easement or the noise corridor and the crash zone that is set up with Illinois Air Force Base. How long ago was that? The only reason I bring it up is because I know that nationwide they've had a lot of issues with the F-35 being considerably louder and the decibels being up to more dangerous levels. This right here, I have no idea how long ago that was and whether that was based on the F-16s or the F-35s. And I would just ask that you guys try to find out this. I mean, it's a very small area. It may go beyond that, but I think it's something that we ought to look into now, because with that noise level, that could change projects going forward. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Yes, go ahead.
My name is Lynn Wood, and I wasn't going to stand up unless required, but that last question, I have some knowledge that that easement was quite a few years ago, and it was based on the F-16, but there was such bad technology back then, that study was badly flawed. Recent study that is probably less than 5 years old has taken almost everything out of that zone. Our property has no noise, and the whole concept of noise blows my mind, because I live over by the mouth of Ogden Canyon, and if you're walking around and there's a 35 over your head, you got noise. I don't understand how you could walk across that line and be safe and be on the other side and be unsafe. It's just lunacy is what it is. So anyway, my comments. And I also want to say I appreciate your consideration on this. I'm the executive of the estate, and I'm an old man. I want to get this thing done. The beneficiaries are 60 years old, and the worst thing that can happen in an estate is for it to go into the next generation, because then instead of 3 people, you've got 30 people with a million different ideas and problems and issues. And so we are anxious, and we are thrilled to have procured the services of Nielsen, and we think they're a quality operation. And we're looking forward. We have already worked with the city on the easement. As you might imagine, if someone's putting in a city shop, that's not real appealing to an up and coming upscale residential development. But we knew that was important for you guys, so we've cooperated, and we have given some land, and the city has given us some easements. And in the past, we've even donated land for trail systems. So we enjoy working with the city. We want to be your partner, and we want to see this be a quality development. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, if not, I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, the public hearing is now closed. Welcome you to the podium. Again, if you could state your name, then share what you would like to share with us about this.
Absolutely. Yeah, my name is Jake Jones, representing Wilson Homes. Really excited to be here. It's my first time in South Weaver, actually. So worked a lot in other cities, but happy to be here and really excited to present this subdivision to you today. I'm sure you have a chance to review, but yeah, 56 lots right there off of South Weaver Drive. And like Hal mentioned, we really feel like we deliver a great product, and this would be no different than the other subdivisions that we've done in the city, in terms of a great product. And yeah, I mean, there's a few issues, just like Trevor mentioned, but I think Trevor's been great, city engineer's been great. We feel like we've got a handle on all the issues, and we're moving forward. So we're really excited about it and happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Okay. Well, with that, we'll open it up for questions from the commission. Commissioner
start.
Johnson, go
I'll
ahead.
start. First question, is there a setback requirement for the easement, the no-fly zone, or the crash zone easement? So for the buildings, there's no setback?
No, there's no setback.
I noticed there's no will serve letter from Weaver Basin Water Conservancy District. Are they going to provide water or what? There's nothing in there in the packet from Weaver Basin, any mention of it.
The will serve from the South Weaver irrigation.
That's from the irrigation. It's not from the culinary water.
That comes from the city. That comes from
Yeah,
South Weaver City.
That we supply that.
All right. Another thing is the water shortage we've been going through. City of Uinta has stopped all development requests until sufficient water becomes available to provide water for any future development. And that's going to be a major issue we're going to have to face for generations. And that's something we need to take into consideration on this. The Public Works is going to put their offices and equipment, heavy equipment, right next to this development. There's how much room is UDOT going to require, or distance between that entrance that for the Public Works and the entrance for this? Do we know that?
So the entrances for this development, if you can see on the map, the entrance is about halfway through the property.
Right.
And then our development's up. So you're asking if UDOT has signed off on the access for
Right,
our
the distance-
property?
The distance between those two access points.
I was not around when we discussed the city site, so I'm not aware of that. So I'd have to.
Yeah, the city,
discuss that
the
with
access
Brandon.
point is going to be right up on that the southeast corner right there.
Yeah, it actually has the access.
Yeah.
Already, just the dirt road, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Is that,
It's sufficient space from that. There's hundreds of feet between those. I believe. No issue.
The UDOT did give approval. That's why the city actually had to share the entrance with on the other end for the city development.
So I understand that. Are you talking about the entrance into Public Works?
yeah, Public Works is
Yeah.
here,
Okay,
so
so
this is here.
what
Two
about
different-
the entrance to the proposed development? Have you got a letter from UDOT saying that they are okay with this access road?
I don't,
No, no.
I don't think it's been submitted that.
I
way.
don't- yeah,
It goes after preliminary, I believe, typically.
That's something we need to be looking at.
And we have had a pre-application meeting with UDOT, and they said, they kind of gave us sign off and said, yep, everything looks good. So we're happy to provide that as well.
since this is a preliminary approval, we're looking at kind of the general layout. I mean, the access point is something that we would have to consider, but a final would not be able to be approved until that.
The, couple of things. The trails and the roads do not match our maps from the general plan. Our
The
general
access,
plan has the road coming right through the middle of this, right where the power easement is. And it's the same thing for the Public Works Department. If you look at the transportation map, it shows the road extending through the middle of that. And I'm wondering if we're gonna have to amend the general plan on all of this.
no, the general plan, as long as we provide the access through, because we're connecting on Harper Way all the way through, the city engineer felt that sufficiently satisfied the requirement in the general
So
plan.
we're basically saying general plan does not apply. Storm drain. You're gonna be using the existing storm drain and the existing basin up there, retention basin. Oh, you got a new detention basin going in, but the storm drain is to go into the Weaver River. Do we know if that storm drain is gonna be big enough to take the runoff from this?
Yes, that's designed that way.
What about the public parking for access to the trail? I did not see any public parking for trail access. Is that going to be put into this plan?
The developer, as far as I know, wasn't required to put public parking
Well, it's got a
access.
public trail. You can turn the trail over to the city. So we got to have public access to it.
The
So we're
public
gonna have to
access
have
is on
a-
the right of way,
Which right away?
the Harper Way.
It's not indicated on the plan.
It is on the very uppermost portion, right next to lot 201. That trail access is there.
The asphalt trail
It says,
Yes.
it says 10-foot asphalt trail. It doesn't say anything about access
or trailhead.
or trailhead.
Okay, I can talk to our city
We need
engineer
to
about
get
that.
that resolved because you're gonna put a trail in there and it's not gonna be open to the public, but the city's gonna have to maintain it. So we're gonna have public access there.
Right. I couldn't remember, my understanding was there just be on-street parking if anybody needs to park there to access that.
Well, it's gotta be identified.
Well, we are, I mean, I could be wrong, but we are deeding the right of way to the city. And so. It's not.
So
like-
it's the city's problem, not your problem. Is
No,
that what
no,
you're
that's
saying?
That's not what I'm saying. No, all I'm saying is, I don't think we'll be painting, I mean, if you guys could if you wanted to, but I don't think we'll be painting lines on the street, right? So it's just, it's a city's road, so anybody can park there, that's all I'm saying. Not that it's just all.
For 6 months out of the year.
Right, right, good point.
The houses are gonna be backing up against the interstate. I noticed that the houses down here on Old Fort Road, there's no barrier and the cars coming up the interstate. This is a mistake we made. The cars coming up the interstate, the lights are shining right into those houses. You've got the same situation here. You're gonna have light shining into those houses down through there. Is the retaining wall gonna be high enough to block those lights? I think it needs to be. Talking 20-foot retaining wall possibly. It's gonna have to be high enough to block any lights.
Our current code only requires a 6-foot masonry fence on that.
Yeah. But that 6-foot masonry fence in your road's 8 foot above the masonry fence, you're gonna get light shining in there. You need to block that light away from those residents.
That would be a code amendment that we'd have to make.
Then we need to be looking at that. Also, noise level from the vehicles traveling down through there, 6-foot fence. Is that gonna block enough of the noise off the freeway? Probably not. UDOT's putting up a 20-foot fence down Highway 89 to block the noise. That's all I've got on this so far.
Commissioner Johnson will not be buying one of those homes along the freeway. So, other questions or comments from commissioners?
I do actually have a couple questions. So, I'm trying to orient myself. So along the eastern portion, that basically butts up against South Weaver Drive, Obviously, you're not planning on putting any properties, homes, anything there because of the noise, easements and whatnot. What are the plans for that property that butts up to South Weaver Drive? What's the approach for the community to look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it would actually just be part of the lots. Is how we have to design it now. So it would be their private property that they could, either just have a really big backyard or have horses, pasture back there. And we did actually look at potentially doing sports back there, but we felt like in this community, we felt like it'd be really cool to have kind of an open space feel back there. But it would be private property.
And those lots that are along the eastern side are your larger lots. You're anywhere from like, I think, again, it's sorry, I need my reading glasses to see the numbers on here. Thank you, what's the smallest there? 0.74, 0.64, oh, 0.5.
Yeah.
Okay, all the way up to just over an acre. Okay,
Even almost 2 acres, but on that, not far, but top.
okay.
top right.
That'll grow a lot of tomatoes.
And is that something with this where the fencing, because normally fencing is done by the property owners? Is this something, because we are backing up along South Weaver Drive, that there's a requirement from the city in terms of fencing? Given that the entrance to the community kind of splits those eastern lots?
We don't have anything in our code requiring it along South Weaver Drive. There is along the interstate.
Mm-hmm,
And so it would be up to the homeowner to put the fencing on.
okay. Because I kind of feel like that, yes, it's not Highway 84, but that's a pretty heavily traveled road for the size that it is, and to not have any fencing. How do the property owners feel about potentially having cars in the backyard, taking out the horses and sheds and goat pens?
No, yeah, I probably hate it for sure, but
Okay,
yeah, in most of our developments, we do have property owners that put in all fences, so.
okay.
Yeah.
My other question has to do with, obviously, between the first phase and the homes that are located to the east, we have our public works property that the city literally just finished the purchase on. How is that section going to be addressed in terms of the access and the connection with Harper Way? Because Harper Way looks like it's just being continued through, but it doesn't really talk about that crossover. And I'm just curious.
As far as I know, I don't believe that we're going to be accessing through Harper Way. I think that we're just going to be accessing to South Weaver Drive.
So off of South Weaver Drive is our only connection into this community?
Off of South Weaver Drive and also onto Kingston Drive.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Kingston Drive is our secondary access.
That is correct. Sorry.
Right there.
Still showing my newness here. 4 months and going strong.
With Kingston Drive though, that still bisects the public works land.
It's no longer gonna go through.
It's not?
That was part of the decision when we purchased the property.
Okay, so do we have like
And
a
part of the
workaround?
Planning Commission debate during the general plan as well.
Okay, because I know that is a concern for me if there is only a single point of access into this neighborhood, especially given the location and that you're really only ingress egress is South Weaver Drive. So I really need there to be like a secondary point of access, because again, we get in a situation in this section of our city and there's an emergency. How are we getting everybody out? Because there's no access onto 84. That's just a point of concern that I have for the development.
You're talking about ours, right, not the city property anymore?
Well, yes, but that's why I was trying to figure out where's our second point of access
For
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
for the development.
The other thing on that is with I take it you're gonna phase the development on this, and the Harper Way will be later on in the development, or will that go in first?
So we'll put it all in just for that reason, for fire and emergency access, so they can go, any of these homes can go up to Harper Way and then out to South River Drive. So that's the current plan. And obviously we have to come back for final approval if we want to do the thing, but I think right now, the plan is to have Harper Way go all the way down to 150 West, and then obviously West would go around.
Yeah, it is a little hard to see the phasing line, but there's a lighter black line that crosses Harper Way.
Yep.
That's everything to the east of that will be built in the first phase.
And I'm seeing it now, so it took a minute.
It's a hard line to see. I was like, there it is.
Because it really does look like Harper Way is connecting, but it's connecting through the public works lot, basically, and there's no, anyway, I'm understanding it.
Anything else, Commissioner Losi,
I'm good for right now.
Commissioner Davis, or Commissioner Walton?
No questions for me.
Yeah, I got a question. I'm gonna try not to rehash what we've already talked about, but there's a couple of items that I just am curious about, like from a procedural perspective. So I just was reviewing the different elements of a preliminary plan approval, preliminary plat. And one of them was copies of all the easements that are pertinent to the property. So not just the Hill Air Force Base, let me rephrase, the state of Utah easements that are affecting the property, but I'm curious also about the power line easement that's going there, because it's also going to be proposed that's a bioswale for stormwater retention, right? So I don't know if we talk to Rocky Mountain Power to know if that's, we've gotten a preliminary head nod, if that's okay with them.
Yeah, we've been having conversations with them a lot, and they looked at the time and they said, yeah, I mean, this looks good as far as we're concerned. And that's one of the outstanding items, that before we get final approval, we have to get an official improvement plan sign off from Rocky Mountain Power saying, yes, this looks good.
Okay.
Well, not just the plat, but everything else.
So, I mean, that's another one of my questions, is just a matter of when we go to final on this, is the planning commission, the way I'm reading our code is we would have a look into those easements, any proposed easements. And I'm just wanting to make sure that we're tracking that too as part of final. But if you go back to the ones owned by the state of Utah. So I'm familiar enough with those easements to know that, yes, we're prohibiting residential development in that area. But I'm wondering, is that the intent of those easements? I think, and not having the easements in front of us, I think we're at a little bit of a disadvantage in making our decision tonight. And so, I mean, that's neither here nor there, but I think in the future, it would be really beneficial to have any copies of easements that burden the property as part of our packet, so that we can have that for review. But again, going back to the question, I'm just a little concerned that, yes, we're outside of the state of Utah easements. I'm concerned about some of the comments from the Attorney General's office that maybe we don't have a process to review, any impacts. I'm concerned about giving preliminary approval tonight and having the state of Utah have heartburn about the decision. You mentioned maybe that they gave an initial head nod.
Since it's a preliminary approval, that automatically means everything's contingent on things being wrapped up. So you can notate in any motions tonight that would be contingent on, the notable items that I had included on there, and approval from the state on any Hill Air Force Base easements that may be on the property, is what he had let me know.
Okay, and I know, I'm trying to remember, and I'm like I said, I'm at a disadvantage in knowing the language within the easements, but does it also prohibit habitable structures to be built within that easement?
It prohibits residential habitable structures, but it does allow for hotels or commercial or storage units.
In our residential low.
We don't allow
No.
that in our zone. The easement would allow that
Okay,
type
I'm
of
like-
development. You're like, we're not putting
What
that
color
there.
are you guys
No, no.
So
we
if an
would not.
airplane crashes, it's going to crash on visitors to the city, not residents.
There you go.
of the city.
There you go.
Maybe one thing I could add as well is Brandon Jones, the city engineer. He's one of the most thorough engineers that we've worked with, and he made us go through a lot to get to this point. And so he's kind of who's directing us a lot on some of this stuff. So, like, in my mind, that's kind of the role of the city engineer, to make sure it all is in line with the easement. And I definitely think Martin shouldn't do your own stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's just part of the preliminary plan review process in our city code, that we have those easements. Since they're not here as part of our packet, it just leaves a whole bunch of more questions that we could probably easily answer, but I don't have that. So, yeah, sorry. So, sorry, just reviewing my notes. It's kind Chair. I had a general question on how we determine how much secondary water needs to be purchased as part of the development process.
It's typically, and I might butcher this, so Blaine, throw something at me if I get wrong. It's typically 1 share per acre.
It is. The state of Utah determines it when the water district is established. And in that particular water district, it's 1 share per acre, which is so many CFS per share. And currently, they only have enough to develop 24 acres.
And what's the total acreage?
They're-
27 shares.
27 shares?
Okay.
Okay.
The total is 33 acres, but we're really, really close to phase one. We're just right around that 27 acre mark in phase one. And obviously we have to do this final, but we also have our own water shares, that we can transfer in.
He's correct. He has 27 shares.
Okay.
And we also have water shares from other districts that we potentially transfer in. And so that's, just so you know, that's kind of our plan, is we would transfer in from, Dave Weaver or whatever, that we transfer into South Weaver so that we can develop the whole property.
Will those water shares come from other drainages, like Ogden River or somewhere else?
That's a good question. I actually.
Because you can't transfer across drainages. You're,
If it comes out of Davis Weaver, it comes out of the same drain.
okay.
Blair, throw something at me next time I say your name wrong.
You're okay.
I was hoping he would throw something.
Ah.
You may throw something back later. when I'm done.
Never.
I do want to address a couple of the comments that came from the public tonight. I didn't see any note about sewer capacity from Brandon and his memo. I think we have real servers for everybody else. I mean, obviously.
You're correct. I didn't see that either. It would be required before final, but I can confirm with Brandon.
I just know when we went back and approved the soccer complex, that there were some issues with sewer. I think they, can't remember if they have put in a lift station or they're contemplating a lift station. And since we're in the same vicinity, I'm just curious to know if you have any other notes about sewer capacity. The other thing, so this relates to another question from public comment. So within our code, it talks about demarcation of any sensitive lands that are from the general plan being added to the plat. And I'm not seeing that. I would assume that it's a rough estimation of where the state easements are. But I know that looking at the general plan, there's portions of that map that traverse this plat. I can't speak to why we labeled them as sensitive.
It could be because of noise, or it could be because of slope.
Sensitive lands was a combination of the noise easements and the OU plume maps.
And wasn't it also hillside?
And on the hillside, the sloughing hillside.
And then we put some, I mean, we have some all over. We have some for flooding, we have some for maybe even dust coming out. I don't know. But I just, that's my struggle, is understanding, if we have it in our code as something that we need to have on the plat as part of preliminary approval, and I'm just struggling to understand the connection to code and what our decision needs to be based upon the fact that we do that specific language.
That right there.
And if you look at the noise contours from the map in our general plan, I would think that that's what it represents. And I'm torn on this because, yes, I get that the models are models. It's all dependent upon the changes of operations up on the face, aircraft, and everything else. But I'm just wondering, based upon the easements that are adjacent to this property, I think it does also talk about how there might be some mitigating aspects of development adjacent to these noise contours, like better insulation in homes.
Required by FHA, Housing
Yeah.
Administration. On the,
Can I say something to that?
Yeah.
The new study takes us totally out of that.
And I get that.
the issue with the new study, and I was sitting on some of the meetings with the people that did the study. The study that was originally done was at Edwards Air Force Base, which is flat. It did not take into consideration our canyon that we sit in here. The other thing is, a study is a forecast. It represents what the computer says is there. There has been no actual sound sensors placed within this area to collect sound data. I was a forecaster for the Air Force for over 22 years. You get you go to make a forecast, you look at what the prognostic maps are showing. You have to verify those before you make a forecast. The sound study for Hill Air Force Base has never been verified. The city needs to verify those contours. The EPA sets 65 decibels as loud noise that's harmful. We're looking at, base says, well, 70 is good enough for us, but the EPA says it's 65. So we've got, there's a lot of stuff there that is not correct.
As a preliminary approval, I just want to remind the planning commission, this is based on the code and the plans that we currently have adopted. So that's what the decision needs to be made upon tonight.
Right. And I brought up during when we were preparing the general plan, I brought up the issue of the EPA and the 65 decibels, and they said, well, gee, the base says 70, so we're going to go with that.
And just so we're, just on that point, the general plan does not refer to that most recent noise contour study, but it refers to the one previously. And so while the noise study for the F-35 did not include good chunks of South Weaver, that's not the one that we implemented for our land use decision for the general plan. So, okay. So I do have concerns about the amount of noise in the area, and maybe look to figure out how we do that, that in final. So, so I'm looking at the plat, and I didn't see a proposal for fencing material on the east boundary. I see one on the west boundary of a chain link fence. I didn't see, maybe you can help me out. I didn't see one on the east boundary.
I feel like so the fence is our responsibility as a city to erect. It would be a chain link fence based on what we have. We could do. Oh, Blair.
Good job.
City code requires a fence to be built on any development between the development and agriculture.
Right.
This is the development and agriculture.
Yep.
So it would be on the developer to build the fence.
I'll have to double check with Brandon. I remember that was
believe
our
the code guys right there.
Well, that's what I recall.
That's what I recall as well.
It's specific to agriculture. And I can't pull up the code website right now, but I'm just curious to know if maybe you have a note, maybe potentially what you plan on putting as a fence material there.
I don't think we got that detail on that side. I know that we were planning on putting a fence. So yeah, I know we're planning on a fence, but
You have them on all the other sides. You have chain link, you have masonry, that one just
Yeah.
seems to be missing the description.
and I think the masonry is going to be required to chain link. I'm not sure why you actually put that there, but I mean, yeah, we'll put a fence, so we're just-
Can I make a request that it not be chain link? I don't think that's something that in terms of a development of, which by the way, I will say, single family homes. Thank you. Thank you for not making it an apartment complex or high density housing or anything like that. I love that it is single family homes. I think that is something that South Weaver, that's what we are. We're a bedroom community with single family homes where people come stay and live here forever and have multiple generations. We love it. No chain link fence, please. Can we ask that?
We can ask it, but we can't require it.
Okay, because it's not in our code, but, thank you.
I mean, ultimately, I agree with the shading doesn't look as good as the others, so it's kind of in our best interest if we're trying to make it look as fast as possible, so we'll definitely take that into consideration.
The other thing I wanted to ask is, I know it's not per se part of the approval for the preliminary, but just as a note, moving forward, potentially the final, and that would be a turnout onto your access road, labeled 150 West. On the South Weaver, I think we have that issue, we've had that issue with other developments along South Weaver Drive, and look to maybe see in the final some kind of improvement there. So.
You're saying from 150 West, the connection on to South Weaver Drive?
Yeah, so if you're coming westbound South Weaver Drive, just to be able to have the deceleration.
Turn lane.
Yeah, that's good. And we actually did, UDOT, we had a big discussion with UDOT about that. And we had a traffic study done, and they kind of projected that out. And this was what they recommended. They recommended just widen it. And so, but we can definitely.
Sorry, to widen.
Yeah, so we're widening South Weaver Drive, as it is. So.
You say you're gonna widen South Weaver Drive down through there?
Yes.
You're gonna put bike lanes on it? It's an issue.
So, are you gonna widen it? So I'm just having a tough time seeing it. Maybe it's just because of the view that I have in front of me. You're widening it just to the boundary of the easement for the irrigation company?
For the, even, no, I think the pavement is, I don't know what it is right now. But I think part of what UDOT says, we just widen it slightly so we can get in there. Just to provide some, it's not, I don't think it's quite technically a deceleration lane, but it's just so that people can access it easier and there's not a big bottleneck.
Yeah, maybe some more detail on that. Would be nice to have. I did have a question. So it doesn't have a street name, so I apologize, but the stub that goes to the west.
Yeah.
Is there any reason why you didn't go through lot, what is labeled 209 to provide that connection?
Yes, and that was actually a big issue that we had to work through with it. So as part of this, we're realigning the canal, the Riverdale Bench Canal, and we had to put that under Harbor Way. And if you look on the northwest side of the property, right where you're talking, the topography kind of slopes down. And so if we connected that road to the west, it would be 5-6 feet in the air, not in the air, but so there'd basically a 5-6 foot drop off to the adjacent property owner. And so that's why we decided, along with the engineer's recommendation, to move it down just to the south a little bit, so that because the topography kind of comes back up, so that it wasn't. I mean, it kind of for two reasons. Number one, because it just looked ridiculous. Number two, so that when the next property owner goes to develop, that it makes it easier on them not to have to start their road. That's how we had the original.
Right. And I couldn't recall, I apologize, the map that I'm looking at right now doesn't have the final grade. Were you gonna bring up that grade near 209?
Grade.
Yeah, final grade. I'm looking to bring up the grading plan.
We can pull that up if you.
Okay.
Has the topography on it.
So can you zoom in on that kind of, that 209? I'm just curious, like, it makes perfect sense, but. And the lots, I don't know, my mind's eye seems smaller, but they're not small lots, right? Like 209, I think was a 0.29 acre lot,
Yeah, 25.
0.25, yeah.
Yeah. Per acre.
That big enough for you?
It is, yes, and thank you. So, I mean, that kind of blends into the next question. There is quite a bit of references to ditches that come from the north and kind of traverse down, I'm sorry, the east and traverse down to the southern portion where you're covering the ditch now, right? That's the proposed,
The canal, the river that canal comes through.
I think so. Can you pan to the east? Jim?
Oh, yeah, yep, that is the river bench.
No, I'm sorry, to the east, so up.
It's,
Pull it the other
it's
way.
opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're on our side.
Right here, existing ditch.
Yep, yep, right, that is the canal, yep, and you're absolutely right. Yep, we fill that in and we pipe that underneath Safety Harbor Way.
I don't know what the ditch is for.
It's for irrigation, the way I understand it. It's an irrigation ditch that just goes straight through, and I don't know where it goes to though. That's a good question.
It's the Riverdale Canal. So-
Yeah, it was piped under Freedom Landing and under Old Maple Farms.
Okay,
It runs the whole length of that area.
so is there an interest there? I didn't see it in the existing easement portion of the plat,
What, and
the ditch itself.
what, because it's being piped underneath Harper Way, it wouldn't be going through any properties, it would just be in.
Was
In
there
or right away.
now?
It is there now.
Yes, yes, and they have I think they have a restricted, I could be wrong, but I think they have a restricted easement. But either way, we do have to get their approval, and we can communicate with them and Brandon, that was one of Brandon's requirements, to get at least sign up from them saying, yes, this book, and they required us to change a few things, and actually, yeah, so.
Okay.
So we do have to get approved from that prior to.
And then can you pan back down to the west? So where that ditch comes out? I couldn't quite find it.
It's right under the road
Yeah.
that they're proposing.
It's
Existing
just on
ditch.
both sides of that.
An existing culvert to be removed.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think especially on the utility plan, you can see the 36-inch class RCP dash IRR.
Okay. Sorry, I jotted down a lot of questions here. So
Keep them coming.
in relation to that same vein of thought, I didn't see any comment about known wetlands. Okay, okay, I knew you would, that's what I bring it up. And then the other thing, as part of the preliminary plan review, we haven't, it's in there. I can't ever remember doing this, but I'm curious to know how much of the existing vegetation you plan on keeping, because there's quite a bit of trees that line that highway.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's right where our trail's going, right? And so I think it'd be really cool to keep as much as we can. We haven't gotten that far to nail down exactly which trees we'll take out and where we leave them, but I think it's really cool, man, and so we're trying to keep as much as we can.
So I think that would be something that we'd like to see on, when we have it final, that landscaping plan.
Yep, I'll make that up.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I had. Thank you. I appreciate your patience with me.
Oh, thank you for your question.
I did receive word back from Brandon. They are, let me read it verbatim so I can make sure. Yeah, on about the sewer, it says it ties directly into Central Weaver Sewer outfall line. There's no issues there.
So capacity.
Mhm.
Okay, so I've got a couple questions. We talked about needing to annex some part of Weber County. Has there been any discussions with Weber County or Riverdale on that?
Yes, so the developer is heading that up on their side to work with the counties to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can speak to my portion. I think Lynn might have some more to say before we got involved, but we definitely we've called both Davis and Weir County, and we kind of talked to them, and sounds like there's some discussion happening already, and so, yeah, we're a part of that discussion, but, yeah, that's the only reason why we did phase 2, so we could resolve that and then come back.
Okay.
And where exactly is the annexed portion? Is it kind of along the 84
Yeah,
north?
yeah, it's on the north side, and if you look at your plat, it's hard to see the phasing line, but if you see the north-south line, or sorry, I guess east-west line, and you just see the county, anything that touches that line, it's one part of the stall. Any long piece to it.
Oh, those people who would be in phase two, if they stayed in Weber County, their taxes would be a lot cheaper.
I mentioned something, I have personally met with all three Weaver County commissioners, I assume Davis County commissioners would not be opposed to this. They understand it and they support the de-annexation. The total property taxes that are generated in that 6 acres or so is less than $2,000. And it's not in Greenbelt. Weaver County portion is not in Greenbelt, it's generating less than $2,000, so. And it's landlocked, and we talked to them, they can't provide any services, there's just compelling reasons for them to. The biggest challenge is getting both commissions to have a joint meeting, where we're thinking about buying lunch.
Feed them and they will come.
Is the city of South Weaver planning on giving up some of our property in exchange for this annexation?
Negative.
Yeah. I know there's been discussion in the past about some of our city land on the north side of the interstate, giving that to Weber County. There's no discussion as part of this annexation process.
So a complete boundary realignment, it has to go parcel by parcel. That's the easiest route if they want. The other route is a little more difficult. So no, there's no intent to seek for
Easy annexation to be used.
easiest.
But both counties agree that only can be serviced by South Weaver.
Yeah.
So that was discussed when we met with the counties as well.
So then my other concern is the calculation for density. We had a similar discussion with another property where we were using unbuildable land in the calculation. And I think with the easement here, that kind of rubs me the wrong way that we're using land in the calculation that we couldn't build on. So.
Maybe a question like that, or just maybe a comment, just provide a little more clarity. We actually do, part of our contract was to purchase the south side of South Weaver Drive as well. And it was determined that is unbuildable land, it's built, right? But I think there was something, if I'm mistaken, but I think the idea of this was it is buildable, just not residential buildable. That's kind of how we were looking at it. Was you could build storage units, you could build something there, not to code, right? Not way to storage units. Buildable, it's not residential structure, habitable structures.
This is one of the first developments I reviewed from sketch to now. And as I looked throughout the code to find our density calculations, it is only denoted in a PUD what we can and cannot use in a density calculation. Therefore, if it's not stated in our code, we can't prohibit that density calculation.
Yeah.
It could be the prerogative of the city council to then amend city code to update it for future developments, but
With that area being zoned commercial recreation, because that's what it's showing on our current land use. Actually, that's our projected.
that's our
land
projected.
use, Is the commercial recreation on that south side of South Weaver Drive. I mean, does that allow for calculation of the density for the development?
So the current zoning is, for the majority of the property, is RLM. And they're not requesting to rezone for that general plan zoning. They're just wishing to keep the current zoning for RLM. And so that's why it can be
Yeah, because
counted.
that area right now is agricultural on the south side.
Not the
No.
complete portion. There's a tiny portion that's 0.546 of an acre. That is
I'm looking at the
agricultural.
map right now, it's all agricultural on the south side.
Yeah, the city, the map on the website actually, I think is not.
That one may be an older map. I will have to see where you pulled
I
that
did the
from.
same, and it's zoned currently RLM.
No, I know for the development. Sorry, I am talking on the south side of South Weaver Drive.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah,
Currently,
south
it's
side.
agricultural. In our projected land use, it's commercial recreation. So how does that factor in when we're trying to consider density?
Well, if it would be included, then it would potentially be more dense.
We don't want that.
But we're not including that portion.
You're not including that south side portion.
Right.
Okay,
So, I mean, we like the design, we feel like it's, really like the bigger lots, and especially as driving out South Beach Drive, feels more rural, so I think that's why I would decided to like this, it's like a better line.
Okay. So Trevor, clarify what we're doing here. Are we approving? Oh, go ahead.
I just have one
Commissioner
reattack
Warren.
on the letter that Brandon provided. There's the cost sharing agreement for the road. Help me understand that. I didn't see a lot of background on what road we have a cost share agreement.
I believe it's only on the portion of Parker Way where it crosses the city
Yeah.
property.
Yeah, so that city property line, that's where that cost share will cover that portion.
So help me understand that. Why do we need a cost share agreement when that really should be an impact fee? Because they can't have a development without that second point of egress.
I think it's part of the access, somebody probably knows better than I do, but I think it's part of, because we own the access into the city property, the previous ownership, and I think that was part of the agreement. They / we would give you that, and then Parker Way.
Yeah, the access to South Weaver, you need our help and we need your help on maintenance. And that's how
Or
it's
Parker,
Or
Harper.
Harbor, excuse me.
I believe he's correct.
In fact, we gave you some ground.
Yeah, so I mean, and this is just administrative point, like those type of agreements not being in a packet make it a little bit difficult, right?
No.
So I don't know if they're written agreements that the city is obligated to enter into this shared cost agreement.
I signed something that the city council signed.
We would have a documented agreement.
Blair?
Mushrooms here, but I think they are-
To you guys, but
Yeah, and that's what I mean, if we're talking, it'd be nice to have those details, in part of our deliberations. Because to me, that seems like something that's, impacting, I mean, the agreement, or this development doesn't go without that second point of egress. And it'd be nice to be able to see that whole chain of conversations.
I did have one other question that actually came up while looking at the maps. With the street numbering and the way it's taken place, obviously your entrance is on the 150 west, and then the next street to the west, you have 200 west. We have a resident that their property address for the generations that they've been here is 186 west. Your street's located to the east.
Oh, so we're on.
So how is that numbering? Like, I think that's something that needs to be reconciled, because I don't think that matches up.
Yeah, absolutely, if that's
So-
the case, we definitely need to check that.
Yep, figure out what that needs to be.
I think Brandon, you got that final ball. right?
Okay, is Brandon, it's on his radar too?
Yeah,
Okay,
Brandon's mentioned to me about the street,
Okay,
street
good.
numbering.
I just wanted to make sure it was on somebody's radar to get fixed before moving forward. Okay. thank you.
That's one of those items before final, we would,
Okay,
So
Trevor,
the 150 is fine. It's the 200 that's the problem.
All right, yeah, no, that's good to know.
so remind us what we're doing here. Are we recommending approval or is this
So
in
this-
our bucket?
yeah, so this is an administrative action for the planning commission to make approval of the preliminary plat. That's within your rights, not the recommendation. It is the approval of.
Okay,
The secondary portion, which is the next item, is a recommendation for a rezone.
thank you. Okay, if there's no further discussion, look for a motion.
May I make a comment?
Please.
Because when this comes to city council, you're gonna get a different amount of pushback on the density request. And I just don't want to waste a lot of people's time. So when this is coming from my point of view, the area that's in the noise area has nothing to do whether it's noisy there or not, in my opinion. The landowner had the residential rights purchased by the state of Utah or the federal government, whichever that was. So when you go to calculate density, you say there's no code for that area. Well, it's not a residential area to calculate a code on. It doesn't matter if there's a code for it. The density should be calculated on the developable piece of property. And you're going to bring it to council. I can tell you right now, I'm going to vote no. So how you came up with that, I have no idea. This is totally different than the properties where we've determined non-buildable, buildable. It is a piece of property that is, the rights have been purchased on it. And so now you're getting the calculation, the landowner's getting it twice. Whether that's the same dollar amount, is a totally different perspective.
The point you're making there, Blair, is that the development rights on that parcel do not exist.
Exactly.
So they
Well, they
cannot-
exist, just not residentially.
But the state,
I have no problem with them having them in someone's backyard. I have no problem with all of that.
but the state of Utah owns those development rights.
Residential
there.
development rights.
Right, so
And so
that has to take that out of
You've
the
now
density
taken
calculation.
the remaining acreage and turned it into an RM zone, not an RLM zone. And some people get big backyards and some people don't. So I really, really struggle with how the heck the staff came up with that calculation. And you've been made aware of that already. And I think you'll hit a brick wall.
Yeah, that's good to know. And maybe can I respond from our point of view?
Mhm.
So from our point of view, I definitely see what you're saying that the rights have been purchased, and I think they have. But from my perspective, the structural building rights have been purchased.
It's residential building rights.
Yep.
Because commercial buildings can go in there if you want,
You're right. So-
but you gotta get it rezoned from the city council and this planning commission, and that ain't gonna happen either.
No, right, and we don't want that either, right? So, but I guess the residential structural development rights have been purchased. I think, we could put a park in there, and that could be part of our development. We could put other residential development things in there, just as long as they're not structures. So in my mind, yeah, I agree with you that there has been a purchase, but in my mind, it's the residential structure.
I've read it. It says residential development, period.
Period.
Well.
So,
And-
but I mean, I'm saying, if you approve it, I thought it was a recommendation. That's the only reason I stepped in, and I apologize. But if you approve it, you're gonna spend a lot of time, and then I'm gonna vote no.
I respect that.
Okay.
But I guess
Because I like the development.
yeah.
I don't like the density that you push down to one side.
Got it.
Good point, Blair.
Still looking for a motion.
So I've got all my notes ready to go to provide a motion. I think I'm still struggling a little bit to that point, but not having all those easements out in front of us, I don't know what the preliminary plan, if we approve it or recommend approval, could mean for those easements. Right? That I don't want to tread on the state's rights, and without the actual easements in front of us, it's hard to recommend approval.
We could potentially table this until we get a final judgment from the state as to, and the development rights there. How is that going to impact on the density? Like Blair's got a very good point there. Having done conservation easements for the state of Utah, when you take a development right away, you don't calculate that land in anything else ever. That goes to the state. The state has the control of that. You can't include that in density. So I think that needs to be resolved before we do anything with this.
And I definitely hear what you're saying, but I guess I just go back to, not all of the development rights were purchased, right? It's just, what was communicated to me and what I read was, we can't build residential structures.
That's right.
We could build, if it got approved, so taking the code away, we're just talking about easement, we could build, like I said, hotel, we could build storage unit, and that was kind of our plan at one point, to put storage units there, but was to try and get storage units there, but So I guess that's what I keep going back to is just the rights were purchased, and even if the landowner is getting, that's not our problem, right? We're the ones that are paying more than we technically should from the purchase side, I get it from the density calculation side, but I guess if it's a purchase thing, we're paying more and we're okay with that. If it's a density calculation thing, I think that it still should be because we can still develop on the land, we just can't.
What my point was, is you're now moving those structures to the other piece of ground.
Right.
And so you're getting the money as if you put the structure on those pieces of ground and those rights were sold. Put a park there, I don't care. But I mean, I don't even mind the backyards there. I'm just talking about the density calculation. That's my only point.
Right.
And you are now making the rest of that an RM zone. Not an RLM zone.
The only question I can have of that is all of our lot widths and average size and everything still complies to the RLM,
I agree.
but the density, you're right.
The density doesn't.
So,
If you look at that.
so the way it's being proposed, I don't have any real objection to the fact that of what you're proposing here, right? I mean, I think it fits. I think the character fits. I think purely from a procedural perspective, I don't have all the information that I need in front of me to make a determination on a recommendation to the city council. Because I don't know what other land use restrictions might play into a decision here. And so I hear that residential structures are not prohibited, or sorry, that they are prohibited, that you have other land uses that you could utilize there, but I'm
We don't know what
taking
they are.
your word for it. I'm having a tough time really moving that ball forward to the city council because I don't have that information in front of me. Or a staff recommendation based upon those easements.
And I'll add to kind of what Commissioner Walton is saying. I'm hesitant you call for a motion. I don't feel like I can make one without a laundry list of this needs to be addressed. And I think through the course of the discussion, you can go back and you can see all of the things that we're wanting here. I don't think that we, as a commission, are ready. I don't think we have the information. And I don't feel comfortable putting a vote to something that I don't have all the cards in front of me. So,
And I get that. And to your point, I mean, we would be happy to have a launch with cash to that. For us to feel like this would get worked out and whether it gets approved or not, I mean, it has to go to the council. We have to resolve these things, but we just want to be able to move forward instead of stop for a month. So that, just from our perspective, we would love to have that list. I mean, kind of what it is, right? But all the things that I've heard tonight, I'm not opposed to any of that. I mean, you can even put something about just as long as something says that the noise easement, the hill airport space easement, has to be able, somebody has to interpret it that you can include it in development, you know? So I guess that's from our perspective. I'm not opposed to a launch list, honestly. We just want to be able to move forward.
has anybody written out the laundry list?
I've got mine.
I have 15 of them at least, but and maybe it would help, maybe it wouldn't, but in my mind, I think the big ones are water, annexation, the state easement review, and however you want to put that, I'm okay with. And then, those are kind of the big ones. And then some other things, you know, the landscaping, the trees, you don't see all that. You want to see the spacing, the public parking, the sewer capacity, so, just to.
Just as a staff note, many of the items that are listed in the laundry list that we're notating are items that will come back in a final to the planning commission to review to make sure that it's completed. With every development, we make sure that those items are completed. We can ensure that they are included in a packet so you can have complete and full review of that. But it is your prerogative to continue the item to a different date.
I was trying to think of how, I mean, I don't want to hold things up based upon the list of items that we've identified here. I think there's reasonable accommodations to some of these issues. I just don't know from a procedure perspective what the motion would be, because I'm not going to recommend approval of the preliminary plan. I'm going to recommend recommend potentially approval based upon these list of items being ready for the city council.
So it's approval contingent on fulfilling these
Yeah.
And
things.
keep in mind that this comes back to you guys, this is not moving forward to the city council.
Isn't that a postponement?
No, what it is
It comes back
preliminary
to you.
gets approved by the planning commission. They go back and
For final.
final comes before you guys, and that's where you recommend approval to the city council.
So I'm personally okay with this going forward if we have a list of concerns from the commission. You've already been told you're going to hit a brick wall at city council, and I mean, that's something you'll have to deal with. But I honestly don't know what kicking this down the road another month is going to do, other than lengthen another meeting for us and, you know, waste a month for them. So, because it is preliminary. I mean, this is just a preliminary. So,
It's, think of the preliminary approval as, we like the general idea, you have more work that you have to get done before we'll approve the final. That is in the sense what you're approving tonight is just, okay, you can keep working on it. But again, that's your prerogative as a commission.
I think sometimes as a commission, we scrutinize preliminary just a little too much. We scrutinize it like it's a final. But we've identified some issues. We've had a discussion about them, and they're aware of that, and they know the brick wall they're going to hit with city council. And
I'll make a motion. Hopefully I've captured all the comments of the commission here. But I would make a motion to recommend preliminary approval.
You're not recommending
You
we're approving.
approving,
Approving.
you're the administrative approval.
Sorry, that's what I misunderstood. Two comments. All right. So recommend approval of preliminary plat improvement plans for Riverwood subdivision.
You're not recommending though, you're either.
I say recommend, I meant just approve. Recommending to the planning commission. For approval, of Riverwood subdivision, subject to the staff memos from Trevor Calhoun and Brandon Jones. And those items identified therein. Also subject to delivery of all existing easements on the parcel and being delivered to the planning commission on final approval of the plat, as well as any proposed new easements. Final approval. Also, subject to preliminary approval and letters from the state of Utah in regards to
The noise
yeah,
and, oh,
I think it's like the air insulation compatible use zones easements.
yeah, the APZ, accident potential zone.
Okay. As well as from the letter from UDOT recommending approval of the additional access on the South Weaver Drive. And approval from Rocky Mountain Power in regards to the bios, well, I'm sorry, the bios well for stormwater retention. Also subject to a landscaping plan being provided. Final. Also a note that we need a determination on fencing material on the east side of the property. I didn't quite know how to capture this, but at least an annexation letter from county commissioners recommending approval of annexation. That's in the county. That's reasonable. Is that kind of where that was going? That's what I had.
Did you get water?
Oh, yes, thank you. So, under preliminary approval letters from the state, UDOT and Rocky Mountain Power, we also want to add approval of secondary water and appropriation of.
So technically, I'm supposed to repeat all that, but I can't read my own writing as I was writing down. So I hope you got all that. Any questions on that? Okay. So we do have a motion to approve the preliminary plat and the Riverwood subdivision contingent on the list that Taylor, the lengthy list Taylor or Commissioner Walton provided. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Have a second. So we'll have a roll call vote.
I'm sorry.
That was Commissioner Davis. So Commissioner Losi,
Aye.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Walton.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. So. Okay, well, that took an hour and a half. I'm still hoping to be done by 8. So we've been good this year. Okay, moving on to item number 5. Public hearing and action on rezone of 0.546 of an acre from A to R-LM located approximately 128 East South Weaver Drive and by the applicant of Nilsson Homes. So Trevor.
I'll be very brief. So this this rezone is just to make sure that the entire project is one consistent zone. It should be noted that that area is up in the top of the screen, the top right corner. There's a hash dot line there that indicates the property that needs to be rezoned from agricultural to residential low moderate. Staff finds this request consistent to keep consistent zoning for lots. This rezone does not prohibit the use of that as open space on that lot, but it's just to clean that up.
Okay. Well, I will move that we open the public hearing on the action of the rezone of the 5.546 of an acre from A to R-LM located approximately 128 East South Weaver Drive by applicant Nilsson Homes. Do I have a second to open the public hearing?
I'll second.
So we'll do Commissioner Johnson on that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the public hearing is now open for the rezone. Do we have anybody who would like to say anything? That is a lot. Oh, good. We have someone.
Michael Grant, 2622 Deer Run Drive. My plan was not to speak, but something happened in the last few minutes. Nobody, the city people, the citizens, we are not opposed to any good development brought by Nilsson Homes. I like it. But we should not be in a rush to approve things. If Rob Osborne was here, he probably just said, clean it up, bring it up next month. We'll get it going real quick. I think we are hurrying through, we are rushing through. Thanks.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, if not, I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, the public hearing is now closed. Is there anything you would like to say about this?
I'm okay, thanks. I guess I'll just, let's say, just that IP, don't talk about this, that's what I'm about to say.
Okay, thank you. Comments, questions from the commission?
Will this be used in the calculation of densities?
Yes. At least it would be the same as, yeah, it would be the same.
Anyone else?
Sure, I'm just looking through our package. Did you have a recommendation? Letters?
A recommendation letter. No, we find it consistent with the remaining of the properties, so we feel it. But
So I'm
what are
just
you looking
curious,
for?
I guess, I don't have in front of me really consistent with the general plan.
The general plan for that area is recreation, commercial recreation, notated. So it is a departure from the general plan on that small portion, but we feel that because it's consistent with the rest of the property, that it fits with what is already zoned for that area.
Any other comments from the commission? Okay, Commissioner Losi?
I want Mr. Grant to know that we hear him. And I think one of the things as a commission, and I will only speak for myself, I understand it's a preliminary. There's a list of things that need to be taken care of, and I don't want anyone to think that we're not taking this seriously and that we're not fully considering what is going to be in the best interest, not only now, but also 10, 20, 30, 40 years, 100 years into the future. So if you feel rushed, I apologize for that. I think we also are trying to make the best decisions with the information we have, trying to recognize the holes that we have, and there's a lot of them in this one, and we're trying to fill those in, and that's where we need engagement. That's where we need people, because we're humans, we're not catching everything, but we're doing our best and trying to. And again, trying to make this be a development that our future citizens, because that's who they will be, that will be living in South Weaver, we want them to have a community that they're proud of, that they're safe, that they can raise their families in. So that's my only comment.
All right, if there's no other comments, I look for a motion. Yeah, and this is a recommendation that we'd be presenting to the council, so.
I'll go ahead and make the recommendation for the public, or the action on the rezone of the 5.46 acres from agricultural to residential low moderate, located at approximately 128 East South Weaver Drive, by applicant Nielsen Home. I would recommend that for approval to the city council.
Okay, so we have a motion to recommend approval of the rezone of the 0.546 of an acre from A to R-LM located at approximately 128 East South Weaver Drive by applicant Nielsen Homes. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
That's Commissioner Davis. So we have a second. We'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Losi,
Aye.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Walton,
I'm gonna vote no on this one, only because I'm a little concerned about changing the general plan, but just need some more details there.
okay. Commissioner Walton, or excuse me, Commissioner Johnson,
I'll vote, yay.
and I'm a yay as well. So that passes with a vote for and 1 against. Okay, so we've got a few minutes here. So number 6, a discussion regarding private right of way. Trevor.
So just to start this off, this is a discussion item. There's no action necessary tonight. What we are doing is we're going to formulate a recommendation ordinance for the city council that will come back to this body in November to make that full recommendation on a completed draft ordinance. So in the packet, we detailed a little bit of why we're bringing this forward. It was something that was identified in code committee as an item to review and discuss and make consistent within our ordinance. Don't advance the slide, Kim. So some current issues is that we don't have a good solution for anybody wishing to utilize a private right of way. Some examples are someone has a large agricultural lot that wants to subdivide it, keep it agricultural, but would not have the ability to create a right of way into that property to access another building. We don't allow flag lots within our ordinance. Our current private right of way ordinance allows for a private right of way to service 2 units, which in that instance would work. It does allow, requires a 30-foot street in that instance. So, but there's also, we also follow fire code, which does allow various sizes for private right of ways as well, anywhere from 20 to 26 feet. We've seen some inconsistencies in some of the developments in the past 10 years of how we've implemented our private right of ways. And so we want to make sure that we have a consistent code to apply. It's your prerogative to recommend any, all, or none of these options in a draft ordinance. That's what we're here to discuss tonight. Like I said, the code has some minor inconsistencies. One other one is our private right-of-ways are allowed in a PUD. They have to be 41-foot streets with a 20-foot easement on either side. So it then makes it 81 feet. So then it really defeats the purpose of having a private right-of-way because we end up having such a large right-of-way. So we want to make sure that we have a good solution. We've had a few developers come and ask about what we would do on private right-of-ways on some of our abstract lots. These are, you know, leftover ag lots or other locations that access is a little bit more difficult. Some people would wonder why we would want to entertain any private right-of-ways, or why would we should we just allow or mandate a no private right-of-way ordinance within the code. Again, that is your prerogative to make that recommendation on whatever that is. It does facilitate better land use for parcels that are irregular, that have some narrow widths or different things. Again, that's something that could be just a landowner's problem to deal with. But we want to make sure that our code isn't prohibiting somebody from using their property rights as well. There's another reason to use them is when an internal street network is not something that we as a city want to maintain, whether that's the physical maintenance of it or snow plow maintenance, such as in commercial lots or in townhome units where our liability can increase because of that. And so there are some instances where we may want to use them. Again, we will move forward with whatever the recommendations are from the Planning Commission, but that's some background there. So you advance it to the next slide. Here's kind of a matrix of where we as staff would recommend allowing and not allowing private right-of-ways. You'll notice that we allowed them in R7A, most of the C, T, and all of the kind of commercial, industrial locations, and RP as well, but have recommended not allowing them in a residential moderate or low density setting because we feel that those streets should be full right-of-ways that are currently within the code. Residential high density with the R7 lot, we recommend a 20-foot. So I'm going to try to be very careful and not saying street and right-of-way interchangeable. That's one thing I've tried to refocus my brain. So we would recommend a 26-foot street. That's asphalt or concrete. At that size, we'd recommend having an ordinance to prohibit on-street parking because that makes the street too narrow when you have 2 cars on either side. That's 12 feet total, right? 6 foot by 6 foot. So 12 feet, that cuts down the size of the road to be 14 feet, which would be only passable by one regular sized vehicle and not anything larger than that. So we would recommend a no on-street parking if we went with the 20-foot street. We would require a curb and gutter along the right of way. The sidewalk would be required if that is the main frontage of the home. Otherwise, we would allow the sidewalk to be on the frontage if it's a rear loading situation. The total minimum right of way would be 32 feet. That would be the minimum right of way. The developer could choose to do a larger right of way, and we could have a discussion at that point on whether we allow on-street parking or not. Agricultural, we would allow agricultural application for a 20-foot street with asphalt and concrete, no curb and gutter required, no sidewalk required, turnaround as required, and so the minimum right of way would be 22 feet with some give or take on either side. The thinking of this is that it would be a farm road, essentially, that would feed into a property, be a standard street, so it would hold up to weather, but it would not be something that we would have to maintain as a city. The others we would recommend as similar as R7, and then RP, we would require a 32-foot street with asphalt or concrete, curb and gutter, and a 6-foot sidewalk required. No park strip required, and the minimum right of way would be 50 feet at that point. So that's a 32-foot street, which would allow a 20-foot lane in the middle if you parked 2 cars on the side. So we felt that was within fire code to allow that. This is the discussion point, though. If you want to advance to one more slide, this is kind of just a visual representation of what those would look like in the zones. Brandon had worked this up for us just to kind of give us a visual, because I'm a visual learner. I like to see it and visualize what that would look like. But this is the time for you to discuss on whether you like any of our recommendations. It doesn't hurt my feelings if you don't, or if you would want to move with any other size recommendations or different things like that.
I just had a question on. Sorry. I just had a question around why the recommendation to always have concrete or asphalt if the city isn't maintaining the road. Like if the example is this is agricultural, that goes to something else that may or may not be agricultural. Is there a reason why we would force a more expensive road and just like a gravel road or something?
It would be look and feel at that point, just to make sure there's consistency across the city. That is your prerogative if you want to allow for other uses such as road base or gravel.
I was just curious if there was something else that was driving it, if it's just visual, I guess.
And it's safer. It holds up a little bit better. We would require, you have in here kind of demonstrate, we would require the standard widths that we would on our normal streets. So it also kind of helps guide if it is a farm road, it goes in, it's at least the asphalt's deep enough that it will sustain long-term use, and it wouldn't degrade over time.
Gotcha. No, I totally get that. That's definitely a lot more expensive, right?
Yes,
So,
it is.
Okay.
And like I said, it's a recommendation, but if you want to mix it, that is your prerogative.
Yeah.
Is this going to be retroactive to existing right-of-ways?
No.
Okay.
This is the only implement on the ones.
Paul's right-of-way which is one lane basically, will remain that way. Okay. Some of our cities' streets don't even meet these requirements. So how can we impose this on private individuals if the city won't meet these requirements itself?
All new construction and new renovation projects.
Existing city streets do not meet some of these requirements.
Are you talking with requirements?
Yes. So why are we telling private citizens, you're going to have to meet these requirements, but we don't have to?
We would grandfather ourselves just as we grandfather anyone else that has a private road already established. And any project going forward, we hold ourselves to that new standard and new construction standard.
Kind of encroaching on private property rights here.
I'll admit, are you done, Commissioner Johnson? I don't want to interrupt. Okay. So when this discussion item actually came up on the agenda, I started doing some research, and what came to mind were communities where this private right-of-way has probably been introduced, because obviously the city no longer wants to take on the responsibility for the maintenance of the road. And two examples that came right to mind are off of Hillfield Road. It's the court at Knights Ridge. They're those super colorful townhomes that are right next to Northridge High School. If you've ever tried to drive in there on trash collection day, you cannot fit a single car going down the roads without putting yourself at risk for hitting something. The same thing goes for those Arrow, which those are apartments. Granted, this is high density housing, but I think there's a place where a private right of way makes sense. I don't think that place is here in South Weaver. And I don't think it's here, especially in our highest density zone of R7. I have major concerns about that being allowed, because I think at that point it does a disservice for our citizens that will be living in those communities. In fact, I actually put that it makes for tighter roads. It doesn't allow for sufficient emergency vehicle access points and parking and waste management. I think it's actually it's a detriment. And I don't think it's something that, as a private property owner, if you have a lot and acreage that's big enough to where you want a private right-of-way, we'll come through the process, apply through the city, ask for that. It shouldn't just be something that we're just giving, because I don't think we need it. And that's just my 2 cents. I know in other cities, it's really only allowed when it's 2 properties, not 7, which again, is going off of our density. The other thing is alleys. Do we have any alleys that exist in our city? That's kind of what this 22 feet would feel like. Why are we doing this? I don't think it's right. And it's, again, as part of the discussion, I just don't think it's even something the city needs to handle as a setting a standard. When it comes up, let's take it on the case-by-case basis, and let's deal with it and see if it does make sense and hear from the property owners that will be impacted. I don't really feel like just giving the blanket permission on this one. I don't think it's needed. So, my thoughts.
And currently, the city does not maintain any private right-of-ways. We don't plow the snow on them or anything.
No.
Commissioner Walton, you look like you're mulling over something.
Pondering. So if I can go back to something Commissioner Lucy said, I just want maybe a little bit more clarification on your comment. So as proposed right now, a 22-foot right of way would only occur in an agricultural zone, so it would not create an alley.
That's good.
Right, so you still have a concern about a 22-foot right of way in an agricultural.
Well, that's what I'm trying to understand on the matrix that was in the packet. Because it's a 26-foot is what you're kind of proposing for the R7 zone. And then when you flip over to, I guess it is agriculture where it's the 20-foot.
I just see it as an opportunity for the property owner to get away with a little less stringent requirement.
Well, again, what's the point of doing it? I mean, do we have that many private properties where a private, because again, this isn't something that everybody's going to be traveling on. It's not going to be accessible to the general public per se. It's going to be probably between those 2 property owners, correct? Like
Right,
that's
so-
the intent.
We've struggled with this in the past. That's why I'm talking about it, that we try to get something in the code is there is no standard.
No.
And then it becomes a matter of, well, I think this, well, no, I think that. I think if we have something defined, we can at least go back and say, this is what we would like. So this is our opportunity to say, this is what we like our code to say.
Well, and I'm fine, like in an agriculture where you've got a larger parcel of land, I see the benefit of that. I don't see the benefit of a private right of way in our highest density zone.
So I was curious on that one too, Trevor, if we go back to the cross sections. So cross section B here, we have that as an R7 potentially, but then residential patio is a bigger right of way. I didn't see an explanation as to why we're thinking the patio zone be different than the R7 zone, because I think in our RP zone allow for a higher density.
No, RP allows for 4 units per acre. And so it's not a higher density zone. The consideration that why we made the recommendation that we did is that there would be a higher likelihood in an RP zone, or let's say a patio usage for multiple people to want to park on the street, even if it's temporary. Let's say there's a family party going on at grandma's house at the RP zone. That's why we would recommend a larger to allow for better on-street parking and better egress for emergency vehicles. Emergency vehicles through code require at least a 20-foot right-of-way. Unless there's a bend or a curve, then they would require a 26-foot right-of-way as per fire code. So that's kind of where we came up with those widths. This 26 feet is manageable for emergency vehicles, provided that there's no other vehicles on the road, which would then create a cramped space. Again, it just would create too much hassle on that. The idea on using it in a higher density zone is the fact of maintenance for the city itself. They're typically tighter spaces. There's more people crammed into one spot, correct? And so then plowing and maintenance and street maintenance, just there's a lot more roads that would go into a project like that. So we would allow a private street to allow for an HOA to maintain. That's completely, if you want to take that off the table, that is your prerogative, but that's kind of the reasoning of why we determined the widths that we did.
So if the Caps or the Byrams decided they wanted to put a utility building out in the back of their acreage, we would require them to make it either concrete or asphalt. That's what you're
No.
saying.
No, this,
Says agricultural 20-foot asphalt and or concrete has to be used.
Yes, so
According to the
that
matrix.
a road versus an access and driveway are two different things. So we're saying we have a 4-acre agricultural property that wants to subdivide into 4 different homes. We wouldn't necessarily want to maintain that cul-de-sac on a plow basis, right? But to maximize their usage on that acreage, they would probably want a smaller right-of-way, a smaller road to access the individual properties. If I had a utility house in the back or a shed, that wouldn't be a private road. That would just be an access through my property. That's a completely separate thing. And so but in conjunction with the agricultural, with it being a private right-of-way, that agricultural lot would still need to comply with all other codes associated with an agricultural development. So they would have to have the setbacks, the frontage, the lot widths in order to comply.
Any other comments? Again, this is just our time to share our thoughts and help craft a future ordinance, so.
I think you're, again, infringing upon private property rights on this.
An alternative would be requiring them to have a full city standard road, which would be a 70-foot right-of-way.
So I think that gives them the option. Maybe that's the counterpoint. Is at this point, if they want to maintain their road, we're allowing them to go to a lower standard. As long as they maintain it, but we still maintain a standard.
But if they want a city road that's
And they have.
managed by us, then it has to
Then
be
it has to meet the city's
full-size.
requirements
Correct.
at that time, yeah. But if an individual's got 4 acres, he wants to put 4 lots, 1-acre lots on it, he's gonna have to come to the planning commission to get permission.
Yeah.
He's gonna have to meet the standards for the roads for the city.
All these private right-of-ways would have to, if they service new subdivisions, would have to come through, and we would review them just as we did preliminary.
So we
Tonight.
say yea or nay at that time.
Mhm.
So by way of discussion, I think there's an opportunity also to reduce the width of a private road and maybe a residential road moderate. You know, if you have a large acre or large parcel development, you know, there's plenty of space to take care of things like refuse, things like that, that are off street. I don't see a need to have sidewalks in a residential LM zone.
Some of our residential zones, we don't have sidewalks.
Exactly. And that's a question. Do we need it?
I don't think we need this.
I think we need to set the standard high, and I don't think we need to be cutting down space, distances, any of that stuff. So I don't think we need this.
City doesn't maintain these standards on some of our city roads, so why are we imposing it on private
A
individuals?
different standards than those roads.
So, still.
How are we enforcing this? Since we know we have an issue with enforcement.
How are you
That kinda
enforcing
comes
the
to-
creation of these roads?
If we're gonna be having private right-of-ways and now turning over the maintenance of roads to private citizens, where's the enforcement? Or are we at that point just throwing up our hands as a city and saying, not our problem, you've got a private right-of-way, manage it?
So
Like, that's where I think it gets us into a situation where we are, as Commissioner Johnson has said, we're infringing upon private property owner rights and being able to do with their property as they see fit, but also the balance that's needed in terms of maintaining a city, maintaining streets, maintaining access, maintaining the general aesthetic feel for the city.
So I think that's a different discussion.
Okay,
So this will not apply to anything that's existing. Am I
Mhm.
correct?
Mhm.
So, but this will apply to any new developments, or so like going back to the acre property, if they want to break it up in 4, if they want the city to maintain the road, then the city will require them to have the, 70-foot road, and, but if they say, no, we want a smaller entrance, then they will take on that responsibility of constructing that road and maintaining that road in perpetuity.
One mechanism is requiring on subdivisions an HOA to have that specifically detailed in there about the maintenance of those roads. That's not uncommon in most HOAs to have a maintenance agreement inside there.
I will tell you the reasoning behind my biggest fear in full disclosure, the Pole property, which just got approved for R7. And now we're having a private right-of-way, and we're having smaller streets on, I'm blanking on the unit count that's in there, 62, 65? I have concerns over that.
So that's, I think, the perfect case for why we would want a standard, because without a standard for private roads, the developer can come in and under that R7 zone, do whatever they would like, because it's a private road.
But only if we're allowing for a private right-of-way. And if we are allowing for a private right-of-way, why are we going to the very bare minimum of street width? How does that best serve our citizens? That's what I have a problem with. Because that property specifically, has been at the forefront of my mind, just in terms of, okay, for the commercial aspect, and yes, there's a development agreement that's in place that has to, coincide with how it's coming. They've got their preliminary. We haven't seen the final yet, so we still don't even know what their actual plan is. But I feel like it's opening the door for some corners to be cut. I feel like it's opening the door for our citizens, future citizens, once again, to not be given the very best and the highest of standards.
It's not opening the door's wide open right now.
Well, we don't have, do we have public access right-of-ways, private right-of-ways in R7? It's not.
We have an inconsistent code,
Yeah, it's all
and
over the
so
place.
it varies from 30 feet to 26 to 20 to 41.
Mhm.
And so the issue is, and part of this recommendation could be just to remove it, right? That's your that could be your prerogative. It's having conversations where we've had it in the past, we've had an inconsistent application
Mhm.
of the private right-of-way ordinance.
And I
So we want to
understand
make
that.
sure that we have a consistent application.
And let's make that consistent application to the highest and best standards. Let's not go short on it.
So I think that's a great inflection point in the conversation. what's our standard?
Yeah.
have
We don't have one. So let's set a standard and let's set it high if we're gonna have to do a standard.
Well, I think that's what this is
Yeah.
trying to accomplish, is setting that standard.
Okay.
And then determining at what size of access roads make sense for each.
And what zone does it make sense in?
Right.
I don't think a private right-of-way belongs in our highest density zone for the city. Is that, I don't know how else to say that. Like, for a residential patio, makes absolute sense. If you're trying to put 4 units on an acre of land, a private cul-de-sac, having a right-of-way makes sense. But our highest density, saying 7 units, we're gonna now have this private road. At that point, I think that's where we're maybe going on the lower end.
So you would want the city to maintain like the roads in Freedom Landing? Is that what you're saying?
Are they R7? I thought they were higher. Because
Well,
again,
I'm just
it doesn't
saying.
apply to an existing, it
Well, no,
only
I'm just-
applies to
just
future.
Hypothetical.
Hypothetically, do they even have the room to do that? Because how big are the roads in Freedom Landing right now?
I think what he's asking is in a development like Freedom Landing.
Yes.
Would you want the city to maintain those roads or not?
And my question is what's the road width in Freedom Landing?
It is 26 feet.
So they're on the smaller end, or short, not smaller is the right way.
But the city can
Describe
state
it.
that if the individuals want the city to maintain the roads, they need to bring those roads up to city standards. So if they got 26 foot down through there, they're gonna have to go in and widen to 70 feet to meet the city standard. So, you know, you've got, I don't see any private individuals wanting to say, yeah, I got 20-foot right of way, but I want the city to take it over, so I'm gonna have to go in and rebuild it to 70 feet. I don't think any of our citizens would come in with that request.
Yeah, so in a way, it protects us from the maintenance of those roads.
We just tell them, no, we're not gonna take it over. It'll remain a private right of way.
Mhm.
We will not
Mhm.
do any maintenance or anything to it until you bring it up to the city standards.
Correct,
Then we can do it.
correct.
So we can just shut that discussion down right there, with the individuals.
So in the development proposal scenario, if a developer were to come and say, I have pick your zone, first sentence on the proposal, but I want all the streets to be private. Right now, under our code, does the state really, or sorry, does the city have any real team to say, okay, that's fine, but, or even to say, no, we don't want you to have a private road?
City would say you have to meet certain standards for health, safety, and welfare of the citizens.
Right now, yes. Right now, how we would approach it is we would say you would have to follow the code. And we're inconsistent on the code,
And
correct? So they could argue, well, your code allows for fire access, standard streets. So we're gonna put 26-foot streets in there. We could decide, no, that's not the one we want to interpret. That's kind of, and so that's what we're trying to prevent is having the inconsistencies. Again, it could be stripping out the inconsistencies and saying the city will not have private roads. That could impede on certain individuals' property rights themselves, to us limiting access that way, for them to use their property in the ways that they want to.
Well, can we say that we don't allow private roads, but if you would like to apply and go through the approval process for a case-by-case situation, is that an option?
But I think I'd be hesitant to do a case by case, because then it becomes arbitrary on the standard that we.
Well, case by case in terms of like, we set the parameters, like we would consider a private right of way if, and list out those parameters. So it is consistent and it's not going to be subjective to, well, this property owner wants this or this property owner wants this. We have our baseline of standards that have to be met in order for a private right of way. Because again, in other cities, it's usually only between 2 properties. Commercial properties, will have a private, like a private right of way. But how many commercial developments are we going to have where a private right of way is really going to be up for discussion? So we set those standards in our code.
One, if we have it contingent on our approval, that begins to inch closer to a development agreement,
Mhm.
which in the past has been problematic. So we want to make sure that we can do it that way. I'm not saying we can't do it, but it does open it up. It's like, well, we'll allow you to have a private road if you do these things. And they'll say, okay, well, then let's write this up in an agreement. And then that becomes a legislative item with the city council. So we could do that. I'm just saying that that's one potential outcome that may not be favorable.
And I think what's really hard about the fact is that you are discussing private citizens' use of their property. You know, when you start discussing a private right of way, you know, and as a city, is that our proper role in government? Is that our proper role with the city council in dictating how a private owner can utilize their home
Only for.
Well, they tell me how far I have to put my home back from the road.
with easements?
With our setback requirements.
But that's, you're not having people drive on those easements. You're not having people access another part of your property. Like, I don't know.
But, I mean, if a property owner is gonna ask for a right-of-way road, they want it. I mean, it's not,
They're gonna go.
they're
ahead and
gonna
build it.
ask for it. So it's not like we're imposing anything on them. I think it's just, we're making clear that if you want a private road, a right-of-way in this zone, this is the standard you have to meet. If you're doing it in this other zone, then this is the standard. I don't think we're necessarily infringing. I think, you know, it's an option for them. If they want a city street, there's the standard for that, and, you know, it'd have to be 70 feet wide. So Commissioner Walton, you look like you still pondering, or just?
No, I think generally what you proposed, I like. I think there's a little bit of tweaking. I think we do need a standard for private rights of way. I think that sets us up for success, so we can provide that quality of life for our residents in the future. I think my main questions really are the 32-foot right of way and its application. I think for commercial highway, light industrial, and there's another one that's maybe just those two. Like I think the application in those zones seems to me like they lend themselves to the wider right of way. And maybe that's really my only real feedback here. Is I think we're going in the right direction. I like what's being proposed. Like those two zones maybe need to move up.
So there's so there's ability to have on-street parking in the commercial zones. Is that what you're thinking?
Well,
I was thinking the same thing, but not because I wanted space for on-street parking, but usually in those zones you have larger vehicles that come
Okay.
through, right?
yeah.
Mhm.
Sorry, light industrial and
Commercial highway.
Really, I'm trying to
Probably.
decide on T1.
Probably, T1 is probably
Transportation.
That's a transitional.
transitional light
Transitional,
industrial.
what's allowed in that?
Industrial type use.
It's like a light industrial.
Like a machine shop though?
Yeah.
A machine shop that's
Mhm.
getting parts delivered
Mhm.
from larger vehicles.
Yeah, and I think that is a fair assessment on those properties.
And even if, correct me if I'm wrong on this trip, sorry, if, let's just say, especially for that T1 zone, you know, that really could be a lot of different uses, right? You could have a developer that wants a private right of way behind that development for deliveries. A 26, or sorry, the 50-foot right of way just doesn't make sense in that application. But if that's the case, the applicant can come to the city and ask for a variance to that ordinance. And we would have the opportunity to say, okay, we can apply the next standard below it, and then it doesn't become arbitrary or capricious. Right? Am I understanding the opportunity correctly?
We could write that into the ordinance.
What is the minimum standard that is required by the fire department?
20 feet and 26 feet for corners or curbs.
That's where we should leave it for private right away.
That's where it's at, 26 on this one, and then agricultural zones. A little tighter.
But we would, on the agricultural zone, say it does have a curve or a turn, we would impose fire because we have to meet fire
You
code
have to
design.
meet fire codes, and what if?
So it allows us to,
If we set fire code as the minimum, then that's it. Or private right of way, whatever. Fire code says it has to be this wide and meet these parameters for our fire department to get in there. That is the minimum requirement, period. Just leave it at that. Health, safety, and welfare of the citizens.
I think Commissioner Losi, you're wanting the
I'm wanting to go
wider,
to a higher
nicer.
standard, a wider standard.
So I don't think we're going to get consensus. You've heard all the comments. Good luck.
I'll get my
and put
dartboard
something
out.
together. So the plan is to have an ordinance to us in November
Okay.
to consider. So we'll be able to hash all this again, and then you can vote. And if you like it, you vote for it. If you don't, don't.
Or since
So-
it's not time sensitive, right? You can choose to continue that item if you're not comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Just
Commissioner
one more comment that I would add, and that's about sidewalks. Like I think there should always be at least one side of the road that has a sidewalk. And there's so many times when you're going down the road and there's no sidewalks. I would like you to consider that, when looking at this again, that there's at least one side of the road that has a pedestrian right away.
We had a situation a while back, 6650, where the city wanted to go in and establish a right of way down 6650 and make it so wide. Well, when they looked at it, they found out that we make this right of way in here, half of the houses down here will not meet the setback requirement. So there's that sort of issue we got to look at also. We can't mandate something which is going to impact private property and an individual's house. We can't mandate that at all. It's a private property right, and it needs to remain that way.
I think it's important to know a private right-of-way ordinance actually expands the property owner's rights to their property because it allows for variations on the city standard road. If we were to fully enforce our city standard road on everybody, which we can definitely do, that in essence could impact property owners' rights because we're requiring a 70-foot right-of-way along that.
Sorry, I didn't want to.
No, you're okay. Any other comments? Okay, if not, I would recommend staff review the minutes of this discussion and catch all those items.
I will.
So, well, we're 15 minutes over my time, but let's keep going. Is everybody okay with that? So item number 7, discussion on residential parking. So Trevor, and then we'll let the fun begin on this one.
All right. This one, I think, well, I could be wrong, so I'm not going to say what I think. No, the recommendations are fairly minor on this from staff. This ordinance is before you based on the recommendation from the IADU conversation to review what the residential off-street parking code looked like in regards to surfacing requirements for IADUs. Now, it's important to note with the IADUs, we cannot specifically impose things outside of the state mandate upon just an IADU property. And so that's why this is being brought forward as a completely residential overhaul of the code for surfacing. That's essentially what we've input in here is that a new main residential driveway approach and parking spaces required by the title shall be surfaced with concrete, asphalt, or other hard surface pavement material. Up at the top, you can see that it says all off-street parking areas shall be surfaced with asphalt, concrete, pavement, masonry pavers or comparable material and shall be graded to dispose of all surface water. Surfacing may be installed in stages. 3B says gravel or crushed rock may be installed for accessory parking in a residential zone and must be a minimum of 4 inches deep, compacted, placed atop a weed barrier, and maintained completely free of grass and weeds and contained within durable borders. Item 4 is just what was previously in the code, just added for parking for public use is what was added on that. The rest of that was already contained in there. So that's just to answer, if an IADU comes in what does that surfacing need to look like for this code as well.
This only applies to IADUs.
This will apply for all new residential driveways. So you can see in 3A, it says all new main residential driveways. So that's new construction only. It wouldn't be retroactive. We wouldn't require all existing to convert. It's all new main.
So new meaning, what if I redid my driveway?
That would
Then
be,
it'd apply.
yes.
Okay.
So I can continue to park my ATV trailers on the grass.
If that's what you have been doing.
So comments?
That was actually my
Questions?
one question that Commissioner Johnson touched on was, does this parking only apply to the internal accessory dwelling units? Or is it across the board to all homeowners? Because we do have a lot of homeowners that are parking things not on any of these surfaces. I'll just leave it at that. And so if this isn't something that's going to be retroactive, I do have a question, like, is this something that needs to be specifically included in our internal accessory dwelling unit section?
Yeah, we
You said we
do it.
can't?
We cannot.
We can't
Okay.
target.
We need to treat IADUs as a residential unit
Mhm.
and no separate from a single family, except for where the state allows us to do that. And that's requiring
Okay.
additional parking space or recuperating any lost parking spaces by conversion.
Okay.
Yeah, if you, yeah.
Well, and I do think part of the reason for why the parking and residential parking has come up in the general application, throughout the city is that when we had the discussion of the internal accessory dwelling units, we have citizens who came in and gave public comment that specifically were discussing their issues. They're homeowners, they're living in their home, but they are surrounded on 3 sides by residences that have internal accessory dwelling units. And they are dealing with a nightmare of a parking situation where, yes, the cars are parking where they're supposed to be in parking spaces on the driveways, but the campers and the RVs and the trailers with the side-by-sides being hooked up to another truck are now being parked along the street. And that's what I think was kind of generating this discussion and trying to set and establish a standard for our residential parking. I don't see how this helps them because these are already existing properties.
So what that would coincide with is actually the enforcement, which is in Title VI, which would be a city council
Mhm.
conversation and not a planning commission conversation, which is something that we are addressing. We're addressing code enforcement as a whole and what nuisance ordinances are and what those look like and how we can enforce them.
Okay.
But that's because that's in a separate title and it's not under the purview of the planning commission. That's why that's not before you tonight.
Okay. No.
Any other questions, comments, feedback for staff to?
Got a few. I'm having a tough time finding a word. I know we've gone through all of these definitions, and everything else. How are we defining a vehicle in this? Because I think, because I'm trying to think of what our objective is. My mind is thinking that we probably don't want, somebody parking that, I'm sorry, I'm just throwing out an example. Like parking your camper perpendicular to the driveway out in front of your house, right? I mean, I'm just trying to think of worst case, something that we can maybe all, or that we can all agree may not be the best interest of the city, the citizens. So in that case, are we defining an RV as vehicle needing a parking space?
No, that would be a recreational vehicle. That isn't currently allowed to have them parking on the street, a trailer
So
or.
I'm just thinking like, if
So-
I've got the setback on the frontage and like a regular RM zone, I think it's like 40 feet,
On the frontage, I think it's
Yeah.
30.
30. So if I, a portion of that frontage is just grass and I park my RV, right across the front of my house,
You can't,
based
that's
on
against code.
what portion?
I'd have to, part of the parking code.
It's-
it says
I
that
bel-
you can't
It's
park.
part of your recreational vehicle.
Yeah.
Code. parking. We just don't have what defines the parking as parking.
Yeah, yeah, that's just,
That's the whole point of this thing too.
yeah. So I think that would be something that I recommend we chew on a little bit more, is have parking spaces that we're defining as applicable to this requirement. And I think, to that end, to Wes's point that he made, where can I park my ATVs? And I think it's perfectly reasonable to say that, as soon as you cross that front setback, you can park them, at least this is my perspective, where you need to. And then it would be subject to some of the surfacing requirements. But I think as soon as you start having it out on that frontage, I think that's where maybe the push comes from other residents. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my perception. So maybe tinkering with how we incorporate the surfacing requirements into the frontage of lots versus
The side.
sides, yeah.
Mhm.
I have no real issue with people parking like an RV on the side of their house. It becomes a little bit of an issue as it starts to encroach on a sidewalk. Something like that. Yeah.
I think Wes wants sidewalks to be a discussion.
So you can then go apply for a private road right away.
And I think what this is trying to address is whether somebody's parking an RV or a car on the side of their house. Are we going to allow them to park on dirt or grass, or do we want that to be some sort of hardscape that they park?
So that was the other thing that I wanted to bring up as part of this. So we say surfacing, shall be surfaced with asphalt, concrete, masonry, pavers, or compatible material. So if I'm understanding, we're saying compatible material might be crushed gravel and rock if it's done properly.
It would be comparable. It's a comparable material to asphalt, concrete, masonry, pavers. So a crushed gravel wouldn't be comparable to those. Does that make sense? Because it's not a pavement, it's a compacted crushed gravel.
But we're calling it out, it's allowed. Is that?
Under the accessory parking.
Yeah.
So gravel or crushed rock may be installed for accessory parking, and not the primary surfacing, right?
Which would be the parking on the side.
I think, as far as that crushed rock and gravel piece, I'm not so much concerned about what happens as soon as you cross a fence or maybe that frontage. I think it's just that interface between what you have, people on the sidewalk or pulling gravel across it every time you move your trailer. That kind of conversation, I think, is where I want that to go, or would recommend that would go. But as far as a hard surface, I mean, there are scenarios where you can have a compacted earth that really is not considered a hard surface, right? But it would be just as beneficial to, I think, address some of these issues, right?
What are we trying to, maybe I missed something, what are we trying to address or avoid by enforcing a hard surface on?
So one of the issues, or one of the things that was brought up is if somebody were to create an IADU for their home, this was specific for the IADU conversation, what would we require that parking space to look like?
Right.
Right now in our code, there's nothing to say that they have to have a gravel or concrete. Right now, they could just claim the compacted earth site on the side of their house as the IADU parking. And so that was kind of the crux of, okay, well, we don't really love that. So how do we address that? Right? That was the general consensus that I felt from the meeting. If you feel differently now, that's, again, your prerogative. But
So, and with that, because it was based on that earlier discussion, we just can't target those. We have to do a
We're
blanket across
establishing
all
a
of
standard for what our residential parking needs to look like
Mhm.
on street
Exactly.
parking.
exactly.
Or I.
But this is going forward, not retroactive.
Correct.
So if anybody's out there freaking out, thinking that they're gonna have to come in and now establish this, that's not what we're trying to do. It's just now it's set, establishing a standard going forward.
Mhm.
So, and I don't have a problem with that.
What about utility easements? Questar's got a major gas line that goes through some properties out here. If you were to go in and put a concrete driveway over, they're gonna object to it. They're gonna say, no, you're not putting that on top of my gas line down through there.
Mhm.
But the ordinance says I have to.
So it's still going through the planning commission, and staff would look at those scenarios.
Well, and wouldn't it be subject to any utility easements in place? Because I know that actually happened up in off of Deer Run, where landscaping was literally ripped out, you know, and a huge path was carved up the hill for the gas utility line, you know, so
That's not even addressed in this.
exactly. So, but if we put something where it is subject to, then
Existing utilities.
existing utilities, because obviously, yeah, you're not gonna put in that expense and then have the utility company and be like, take it out, that will cause problems.
The other question I had is, what is a project car or just a regular parked car become, or where that car is become a parking space or an off-street parking space? That needs to probably be addressed somewhere.
So
Long-term project.
Yeah.
I get concerned when we start talking about severities and trying to, you know.
I'm just thinking of what's out there
plan for
now.
every-
Like, if we know that we have an issue with somebody that, there's some scenario where there's what we consider or define in our code as a parking space, are we gonna have code enforcement go and address that? I don't want that.
So in any development, if it's a new residential development, which this would apply to, correct? Those go through the development review process. We examine all easements and make sure that the developments comply with those easements before they can go forward for new. Now, if you want to, for existing and they're updating, right now, correct me if I'm wrong, King, we don't require any permits to extend driveways.
No.
Um,
You don't have to get a permit.
that is something that we could explore of getting approval by city staff so that we can have a cursory review and make sure that it's not impacting anything that would need to.
That's really good that we don't need a permit because I just changed my driveway.
But
Happy to
Commissioner
hear.
Bowman, maybe I didn't have the right example there, but really it's that process.
Mhm.
When does someone enter the process to come to, you know, planning commission staff, whatever it's gonna be, to say, I'm gonna have an off-street parking space. Well, what's that? What's that threshold? That they need to then come in.
Right now, there is none. So if you wanted to extend your driveway, you could do that.
Had it. Good luck finding concrete.
Yeah, I know. Theoretically,
Theoretically.
if you had concrete available at your disposal.
I mean, I don't have a solution to it. I just think it's something that we need to consider.
Mhm.
When do we say somebody is creating an off-street parking space? When do we require somebody to come in and say, I'm creating an off-street parking space? What do I need to do? Like, I think the text is approaching something that we can start, you know, iterating on,
Building on.
chewing on, but I think that's the next step in my mind.
So you've
So
got,
having a review process is what you're concerned about.
so I think you've got some feedback. Any other comments?
I'm good.
Okay. So again, do your magic,
Okay,
see what you can come up
we'll
with.
do that.
And I think also with this one, I don't know if this one really is pressing, so if we
Mhm.
can't meet November for it, I think that's okay.
Mhm.
So,
Second Tuesday next week.
all right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't there a little bit more urgency to this one based upon what is our initial
Not-
desire?
Not necessarily. There's no deadline. It was just a recommendation to review. The only urgency would be a self-imposed urgency if there are new IEDUs coming forward. We follow the current code, right? So that's just something to consider.
I think that's what is sticking in my mind is we tried, is that ordinance is crafted and put into the code. We will probably want to have a standard ready to go for off-street parking requirements as people come in and make applications.
But didn't you just
Well-
say that we can't require it for internal accessory dwelling
Well,
units?
you,
Am I
but-
missing something?
Well, the thing is that the IA whatever
Mhm.
needed to be in place by
Mhm.
what, October
Yeah.
31st or something?
So that was time sensitive, but as far as the parking requirements on an internal accessory dwelling units, I thought you said that was something that we can't.
Yeah,
No,
so
no.
what I'm saying is that that's the instance where a new driveway would be installed in a residential
Okay.
lot, right? That they would come in and apply for it as a new residential unit, basically. And
Okay.
so then we could, right now, we have to input code as it is.
Is.
And so if they identify, yes, this is where I usually park my ski-doo and
It could be whatever it is now.
I want to park it here and I'll move my
Without
ski-doos, yeah. Does that make sense? So, that's the only urgency
Right.
is if we wanted to get code in place to help guide the implementation of new residential units.
The statute does allow the cities to require one additional off-street spot.
Mhm.
And so I think that was another part of our conversation that drove this.
Mhm. Yeah.
Was that required spot?
And being since the state doesn't allow us to require one additional concrete lot
Paved, concrete, whatever, dirt.
without requiring all residential units to also have that same standard.
Mhm.
I don't have suggestions for Trevor. I didn't catch any suggestions. I just,
Keep working on it.
I don't know what.
Are there any
you guys-
substantial changes to
Yeah.
what is
Like-
before, was before you? Right now, we're just before you, so any objections to that's a personal thing.
I think we just need a rule set for when we're gonna want to apply the standard. Whether it's somebody coming in, you know, what, I don't even know, like, to your point, you're not creating an off-street parking space per se when you expand your driveway. So the only scenario that I can see right now is when somebody says, I want to enter interior accessory dwelling unit. We go and get this, which
Mhm.
seems like we're all of a sudden targeting.
but it still applies to the whole city.
But it applies to the whole city. That's
So
I don't want to say it's a loophole. I'm just saying that becomes a new residential unit. And so then it would apply to, as written on this code, it would apply to that, right?
And
So
that's
then
really
we
what I'm
would-
trying to make, is that distinguishing between how do we make it not seem like it's a loophole or.
Speaking with Jamie helped me craft this and he was comfortable
Because
with it.
technically, if Gary would have come in and said, I'm gonna make an RV pad, what do I need to make it out of? We would have gone right to this, just like the IADU guy would do. That's where that's where it's applied to the whole city. If you already went concrete, it doesn't matter, or gravel or whatever it is. But that's what should technically take place.
And I think that
It
would be
doesn't
my-
always happen, but that's what technically should take place.
That would be my recommendation, is what's that threshold for when we're gonna say, this is now an off-street parking space, therefore this is the standard.
And one other thing, if they already have plenty of parking, we can only require 2 spots. If they're using their garage and they're not turning that into the ADU, then they just need 1 driveway spot to park for an IADU. So technically, we're not picking on them. As long as they currently have it, they don't have to do anything. It's if they're adding new driveways, we just have a standard that says if you're gonna add a driveway, if it's your main driveway, it needs to be this standard, and if it's a secondary, you can have gravel. I mean, that's all it's doing. It's just giving some standard.
Anything else? All right, good luck. Good luck, Trevor.
I love it. No, I love these conversations. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Walton, Utah APA report. You can make it brief or we can postpone it.
No, I'll make it brief, because it was so long ago, I don't know how much I can remember of it. So I had the opportunity to go to the Utah chapter of the American Planning Association and participate in their event. Which had a great time learning about some of the salient land use issues that are facing the state of Utah. Talk with other planners, planning commissioners, what have you. So the main thing that I really want to bring up, well, first of all, thank you for the city for providing that. That was a great opportunity. We recommend it to anybody who wants additional training or insight. It was a great event. where we stand with our water usage and how there's a connection to land use decisions. And what I really pulled from that is, how are we talking to like Weaver Basin Water Conservancy District when we make a land use recommendation either in the general plan or when a development proposal comes in? What are we doing to address the fact that more people in a community that do not have all the water that we might need in a given year? So the recommendation is maybe some possible solutions was how do we look into bringing South Beaver, Beaver Basin Water Conservancy District into things like our general plan. What I mean by that is just a narrative in our general plan about where our water comes from. You know, what kind of holes and demands are on on the basin. And I think, you know, we do a great job in our general plan in making descriptions of the conditions within South Beaver, but we never make a description based upon the availability of water and use of water. That's such an important resource in our community. I really liked the idea of just providing a narrative of how we use water in the city. There were a couple of resources that they made available. Some land use guides. There was a gentleman from Western Resource Advocates that is willing to come in and make a presentation to how other municipalities are addressing water shortages and their land use decisions. And so that avenue is available to us if we so choose. I thought that was a great opportunity. Other one that I wanted to bring up was as it related to water use. They said by and large it's outdoor water use, right? That we lose a lot of our capacity. That's where the predominance of our uses are. But they said that there are other opportunities to look at your ordinances and look at post-construction usage. So the types of fixtures that go into homes. That was another recommendation. That's another tool in our toolbox. I attended another session about billboards and different points in time where we can address billboards well or how to utilize. And this one stuck in my mind is we're potentially looking at maybe a design of 89 that intersects South Beaver. Those billboards will potentially be moved or relocated based upon the width. So there's an opportunity to maybe look at how our ordinances address relocation of billboards. It's a very interesting conversation. And the other one, Trevor, I don't know. Trevor and I attended this one together, and it was the development agreement versus ordinance scale. I think what I got from that is nobody really knows what the right balance is between.
Just like that.
Yeah. So they're not, every city seems to be grappling with, you know, do you lean towards doing a development agreement or do you write in a strong code? But what I wanted to share is the city of Mill Creek had a development agreement for reconstruction of their kind of city set. Apparently that was getting a lot of attention. So if you wanted to go and review that, they recommended that, you know, planners, commissioners look at that as maybe something that you look to implement.
Prime example of this up in Morgan County right now, ski resort development. The citizens bringing it up as an initiative on the ballot. The developers are saying, we're going to sue you if you do. Because they got a development agreement.
It's a tricky thing because in essence, development agreements could be utilized, maybe even overutilized to the point where you're circumventing. That's the real litmus test. Are you pushing a development agreement to get around certain elements of your code? Then it becomes problematic on a lot of.
We've seen that here.
And borderline illegal, right?
Yeah.
If you're always using it to circumvent code, it's not legal.
Right.
So case for stronger code.
Yes, yes. So I think we're providing maybe some recommended language in the update to our code that addresses that balance. So that will be coming. The other one that I wanted to bring up, the other presentation that I attended was group decision making. I thought the Utah League of Cities and Towns did a great presentation about how great it is to have a group make a decision, but there are certain parameters that or certain issues and scenarios that can corrupt the ability for a group to make a good decision. And I don't know if there's an opportunity that we can reach out to the Utah League of Cities and Towns to come and provide that presentation, but I thought it was a really, really good one. I couldn't take notes fast enough. They did provide a slide deck for that presentation, but I thought it was really good. Maybe that's something I'd like to reach out to Utah. So, one other item that I wanted to bring up is it seemed like a lot of the other planning commissions required some kind of training event or continuing education for their commissions. And I know we're still, I'm not sure quite where we stand with our bylaws, but I thought that was a really good idea, is, attending the Utah League of Cities and Towns, training events or APA or.
One thing with that is that in the state, there's a law requiring you to have 4 hours of continuing education as a planning commission member.
Every year.
Every year. So there are some things that have counted, like our open meetings training a little bit ago counts. There's a few things that count. So I have to keep a record of that just in case they ever want to audit that. So if you ever do any trainings, let me know so I can just say, yep. But in that vein, we will be doing trainings the remainder of the year, everyone.
I gotta say, that came up in the last meeting, I thought, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on, planning commission comments. I wanted to bring up something. Our next meeting is scheduled for November 11th, which is Veterans Day. I would rather honor our veterans and not have a meeting. And so Trevor and I talked about moving the meeting to the 4th, the week earlier, but wanted to run that past you for your feedback. Yes.
I should be able to make it up.
Yeah, I'm fine with that change.
Okay. So everybody okay with moving the next meeting to November 4th? then? Okay.
We'll make that change on the website too.
Okay. That's all I had. Commissioner Wilson.
So very important information taking place this Saturday. I understand the Youth City Council is having a trick or trunk or how?
Trunk or treat.
Trunk or treat. Thank you. I'm saying that wrong. I want to know what everybody's wearing. What's your costumes? Come on, we got to represent. I hope everybody's planning on going like full costume. Get into the spirit. I love Halloween. Go drive by my house. You'll see why. But no, seriously. So is everybody planning on attending from the planning commission? Okay. You'll be out of town
What's the day?
on Saturday, the 23rd,
Saturday.
from 4:30 to 6 o'clock. And in case of inclemental weather, I understand that the backup is to go to Highmark Charter School and do it in the charter school. But I'm hearing it's supposed to be good weather this weekend, so. And you just have to show up. Like, that's from what I'm understanding is that the Youth City Council has taken care of all the
They'll have
planning.
candy for
They will have
all of
everything.
you and the other.
You just need to
elected
show up in a
officials.
costume and be ready to have some fun, so. Except for Commissioner Johnson and Commissioner Walton. I want to see everybody there. You're gonna miss my costume. Yes, well, and there is a candidate, meet the candidate debate that is following from 6:30 to 8:30. So just some events that are taking place for the city.
Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Commissioner Davis? Commissioner Walton?
Just one other thing, as we, deliberate over things that we see in the code, I think the city council is interested in hearing from us on what elements of the code are and are not working. And based upon tonight's conversation, I would like to make a recommendation that we look at how we determine developable acreage. especially as it relates to hillsides. So I don't know if that would go to our code committee or if you, I assume it would, not to the council. I don't know quite how that works now, but I just wanted to bring up that issue.
Yeah, we'll discuss that. I believe we'll probably discuss that with the mayor, just make sure that that's on track for what we want to do, but yeah, we'll work on that.
Anything else? Commissioner Johnson.
You know, a lot of discussion going on about the dust problem and what needs to be done about that. We can extend that to the noise from the F-35s. My iWatch tells me that many times we exceed 90 decibels in my backyard. And I think the city really needs to take a strong look at a series of sensors to measure decibels in this area, particularly when the jets are going over. And in the past, I recommended to the city that we set up at each of our parks and the city hall here, that we set up sensors and get some data, definite data that says this is what the decibel readings are. I think we need to really pursue that. Other than that, this is a heck of a way to spend my 48th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
Planning
See,
commission.
I was trying to get done
yay.
early for you. It didn't work. I apologize. Well, anything from staff?
No, you covered everything we need to.
Okay. Well, with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We stand.